After nearly a decade of friendship, I confess my feelings, only for him to leave my message on read. What now? As the title indicates, I have developed romantic feelings for my best friend of nearly 10 years. We have shared a friendship since high school, and there was a moment when I came to realize that I loved him. However, this is rather a complicated situation. I will attempt to summarize significant parts of the story to make it easier to read without being overly lengthy. It remains quite a long narrative, so you may want to grab a drink and a snack to settle in. Please take the time to read the entire post before offering your comments or forming judgments. Here it goes. We first crossed paths during our sophomore year, 2018, in art class. Our introduction was not at all how you might envision. At the time, I was involved with my high school sweetheart, whom we will refer to as X. Meanwhile, best friend was involved with someone named Glasses. The way we actually met was through another close friend who was curious about who our mutual friend Glasses was dating. His previous partner had been somewhat difficult, so she wanted to look out for him. I mentioned to her that we had an art class together, which led Bestie to ask me to investigate best friend. I, of course, agreed. A couple of classes later, I saw him. He was rude, whiny, frequently complained to both the teacher and his peers, and essentially behaved like a child. I particularly noted how he spoke back to the teacher regarding an assignment he flatly refused to complete according to the requirements. For about a week, I reported back to Bestie about my observations, and we came to the conclusion that we did not like best friend. A few days later, Glasses introduced us to best friend, and my impression changed entirely. We had mistakenly judged him based on another individual's behavior, whom I now refer to as teenage man-child. Best friend turned out to be a fantastic person. He was attractive, really kind, a tad flirty, had a delightful laugh, interesting hobbies, and of course, he rode a longboard. He immediately caught my attention. Bestie and I felt relieved, and for the most part, we all became friends. Best friend and I began spending more time together, and even sat next to one another during art class. Did I mention that X was also in that art class with us? Best friend quickly formed a friendship with X as well. We all occasionally hung out during school and after class. Glasses and best friend's relationship ended after just a few weeks, but everything was fine once some additional time passed. I found myself hanging out with best friend more often since we lived surprisingly close to one another. Fast forward to junior year, best friend and I had grown significantly closer, shared more classes, and spent additional time together. I discovered that best friend had a bit of a reputation with women, and I started developing feelings for him during that period. I felt guilty because I was still dating X, although my feelings for him had faded. Then came 2020, and in the middle of the second semester, COVID-19 hit, followed by quarantine. I was struggling, much like everyone else. Stuck in a toxic household and relationship, I found it challenging. Once quarantine ended, we returned to school a couple of months later. I got sick and was sent home, only to find out that I had pneumonia rather than COVID. Best friend was one of the two friends who checked in on me during my illness. When I returned to school, a friend rang me out over something ridiculous, and I made the decision to stop associating with them. They weren't genuine friends anyway. Shortly after, X and I began to hang out with best friend and his group of friends. A significant moment transpired between best friend, X, and me. Now we arrive at senior year. At some point, my biological mother advised me to stop seeing best friend as she sensed there was something more. X and I broke up for a few weeks during the late fall to early winter, partially due to this. However, I was still uncertain about my feelings, as I did not fully understand what love was. During those weeks, best friend flirted with me a bit more than usual. He was also involved in another situationship with a guy I will refer to as John. I wanted to flirt back, but it felt too soon after X, plus he was with John. Subsequently, I experienced a pregnancy scare and, regretfully, got back with X, even though I had not wanted to be with him for a significant part of our relationship. Best friend acted mostly normal, but appeared a little distant as he resumed his situation with John. X unexpectedly dropped out of high school in the last semester, and foolishly, I remained with him. During that time, best friend and I became significantly closer, which made X a bit unhappy since he was somewhat jealous and insecure, though he usually hid it well. Summer 2021 arrived, marking the end of high school. Best friend and I graduated without X, which only made him bitter and resentful. They found jobs while I was preparing for college. X lost his job after failing a drug test, which wasn't surprising. My home life worsened, and I could no longer tolerate X. I began to question if I had genuinely ever loved him, developed a dislike for him, and even wondered if I might be gay due to my aversion to men. The only person I trusted was best friend. I attended a lakeside party hosted by best friend and his friends. I intentionally did not invite X, as he was an absolute party pooper. His negativity impacted my desire to socialize with other guys, even if it was just for school group assignments. X eventually found out and was understandably upset. He did not want me spending time with best friend for reasons I could comprehend. When Christmas came around, he crashed uninvited and stayed overnight, which I loathed. Finally, I ended things with him after New Year's because I knew I could no longer bear the situation. I was now free to do as I wished. I got a job, explored dating apps with little success, and found that I was spending less time with best friend as we both worked. We were maturing, slowly drifting apart. The summer before I turned 19, 2022, best friend and I finally discussed an incident that occurred between him, X, and me during high school. We talked about how he had kissed both me and my ex before. Yes, we are all part of the LGBTQ+ community, and no, we are not theater students. I never disclosed how frequently I think about that moment. We were alone at a friend's place, helping out while they were away, and the tension was palpable. A few months later, I made the worst decision of my life by becoming involved with someone who attempted to create a rift between best friend and me. Regrettably, I let X2 know that best friend was gay in order to keep him calm, as he was much worse than X1. Best friend and I spent time together regardless, but things turned strange with X2 around. I also ended that relationship with X2 shortly after New Year's for various reasons, but that is a story for another time. Best friend was thrilled that I had left X2, but he behaved differently when I revealed that I believed I was gay. He became less flirtatious and stopped attempting to hold my hand. This was understandable, yet part of me felt disappointment. Why was I disappointed if I identified as gay? Now it is 2023 and best friend and I remain incredibly close. We frequently hang out, visit each other's homes to play games, and so on. We even hold hands, call each other babe from time to time, and cuddle. However, I moved during the summer, relocating across the state. This meant instead of being a few minutes apart, we were now 10 hours away. We lost contact briefly due to issues my family was facing up north, and I am uncertain if I will ever feel comfortable sharing that story. Nevertheless, best friend and I continue to make efforts to maintain our connection. We send each other short videos and text messages, play games online together, and update each other about our pets. Fast forward to the summer of 2024, a year after my move. Bestie was getting married. I returned to my hometown for the wedding and to reconnect with family members. I was at my sister's place when best friend and I reunited for the first time in over a year. He lifted me by my waist and spun me around as if we were in a movie. I had to wrap my legs around him to avoid falling. He placed his hands on my waist and upper thigh, alarmingly close to my rear. Then, he set me down and we chatted, hugged, and eventually went inside after a few moments. While playing games with my sister and her roommates, he leaned back onto my thighs, using them for support. I was lying on my side on the sofa bed while he was just in front of me. He turned towards me and remarked that I was very comfortable, then snuggled into my legs. My sister and her roommates exchanged glances that suggested they sensed something was happening that I was unaware of. Then came Bestie's wedding. Best friend was unable to be my plus one, but he drove me to the venue. His jaw dropped upon seeing me, and he told me I looked stunning. Throughout the car ride, he leaned in closer and gazed at me, prompting me to remind him to focus on the road. I felt beautiful, even while dressed casually. A few hours later, I returned to my sister's place. Best friend dropped by late in the evening with some drinks. We got comfortable, smoked a few joints, and were practically sitting on top of each other. His gaze was fixed on me, and at one point my legs draped over his. We were talking, laughing, and enjoying each other's company when I briefly turned away for a reason I can't quite recall. I felt a slight movement, and then an inhale against my neck. He had leaned in so closely that his nose brushed against my skin. When I turned to look, Oh my, the eye contact. Our faces moved closer, but then a friend walked in with her boyfriend, interrupting what might have occurred. Tensions remained high between best friend and me, but soon he had to leave. He nearly stayed over, but opted not to since my sister's roommate's dog had attacked my dog earlier, something both he and I despised. He left, and we hung out again a few days later. We shared conversations about our mental health, the situation up north, and other personal matters, including a few of his romantic endeavors, which I jokingly referred to as his conquests. I don't remember how it arose, but he told me he always thought I was very attractive. Soon after, my trip came to an end, and we had to say goodbye. Only a few months later, in the fall, I headed back up north for a family member's funeral. Best friend worked that day and was unable to attend. We met that evening at my sister's to discuss the situation and catch up on various topics. That night, he stayed on the couch next to me. At some point, we both awoke, and he asked me to cuddle. Regrettably, I was too tired to respond and missed the opportunity. In the morning, we found ourselves awake, and he mentioned feeling cold. I agreed, and he invited me over to cuddle with him. We nestled closely together on the small couch, his arms wrapped around my waist, and at one point his hand slid down to my rear. He left it there for a moment, then apologized, but I assured him it was fine. Just then, my sister walked in and flopped down on top of us. Although the moment was spoiled, we had fun piling together. Best friend remarked that I was the only person who could get him to sleep around the dog. He had to depart soon for his family's Thanksgiving plans, leaving me longing to be in his arms again. A few days later, I attended his sister's baby shower as his +1. There, I was introduced to more of his family, who ended up believing I was his girlfriend. Throughout the shower, best friend introduced me to his family, bragged about me, and kept me close to him. At one point, he performed a romantic gesture reminiscent of a K-drama, swinging me around just like the male lead would do with the female lead. He did this in front of his mother, sisters, and cousins. Although he accidentally nudged my head against a cabinet, I teased him about it while his family cooed, calling us adorable. At some point, we stepped outside to talk to some cousins, and he placed his hand on my lower back, gently sliding it further down and leaving it there for a good 20 seconds. After playing some party games, sharing a few shots, and impressing everyone with my spice tolerance, we slipped away for a smoke in the back where I admired the stars in the night sky. The area had minimal light pollution, allowing me to fall back into my previous habit of naming the constellations from memory. He asked me about constellations, and I attempted to show him, but struggled with the angles. So I decided to be bold, pressing my back into him, resting my head against his shoulder, and resumed pointing to the stars. We remained like that for about 10 minutes, warmly snuggled against each other while I identified the stars. Eventually, we returned inside to his bedroom. As I walked past him, he remarked that I smelled sweet, akin to vanilla. I corrected him, stating it was actually jasmine, and opted to be audacious by asking if he wanted a closer smell. I offered him my wrist, and he took a whiff while maintaining eye contact. After that, we watched cheesy horror movies and enjoyed tres leches cake on his bed. At one point, I can't remember why exactly, he mentioned he didn't want to make me uncomfortable because I was definitely gay, but I admitted to him that I wasn't. I had developed a distaste for men as a result of past relationships. He tensed up and we continued watching the films. Eventually, we grew tired, and he had to wake up early the next day for a family outing. I borrowed some of his clothes to sleep in, and we nearly shared the bed. Our backs were turned against each other beneath the covers, and then he suggested he sleep on the floor instead of falling off. We drifted off to sleep facing each other and woke up when his fish tank turned back on at 5 a.m., an hour earlier than planned. When we awakened later, he told me I looked like a Barbie. We drove to a nearby coffee shop and then back to my sister's in silence. When we arrived, we bid each other farewell, and he mentioned he would try to visit one last time before my flight. However, he was unable to make it. When I returned home, we even discussed a hypothetical marriage to facilitate his green card and living together. We literally planned a future together, considering what kind of house we would have, what garden we would create, where we would place our pets, and so on. Remarkably, he even stated that his family wanted him to marry me, though he expressed that it wasn't the right time since I was far away and preparing to return to school, stressing that he didn't want to impede my future. Fast forward to just a few days ago. A friend and coworker of mine was reading this after I shared it with her, and she acquired his number from my phone. She texted him, letting him know about my feelings, which I was aware of. He read the message but did not respond. Furthermore, he has ceased replying to my messages as well. Am I being delusional, or is there indeed the potential for something meaningful between us?